B Corps are businesses which have been awarded an external accreditation by B Lab, which is a US non-profit organisation, for what B Lab describes as high standards of social and environment performance, transparency, and accountability. The B stands for benefit, and in its simplest form, B Corp status is a third-party certification that certain businesses are driving social and environmental benefits. B Corp status doesn't change the legal form of the relevant company, but it is intended to it's intended as a mark of approval that the business in question not only operates to generate profit, but for the betterment of its employees, customers, society, and the environment. So, who can become a B Corp? The B Corp certification is available to most for-profit businesses. So it's not available to charities, and it's not available to any other non-profit organisations. Businesses need to have been running for a year in order to apply, because the certification process is based on demonstrating the practices and policies which are required for certification, rather than it being aspirational. So it's not enough to just want to drive social and environmental change. The businesses applying need to be able to demonstrate that it's already actively operating in that way. And this year-long rule is dated from when at least one individual started contributing more than 35 hours a week to the company. However, if you're considering B Corp status and you think, well, we haven't been up and running that long, or you're considering starting your own business and you're interested in this, younger businesses can become pending B Corps. And we'll talk a little bit more about this later. But it is worth noting that being a pending B Corp isn't a prerequisite to becoming a B Corp. So if you are in a position when you can move straight to that B Corp step, that's absolutely fine. So why would you consider becoming a B Corp? And I imagine that lots of you on this webinar have already know a little bit about this and are interested in the sort of potential benefits that being a B Corp could be. So B Corp certification can act as a stamp of approval to third parties that your business is committed to having a positive influence on society and the environment, alongside whatever your business is there to, what problem your business is there to solve. So, as well as providing a framework for that positive influence and generally being a force for good, and being sort of conscious that your business is doing everything it can to benefit the environment and society, there are likely to be other commercial benefits that flow from that. It might be really useful in attracting the best talent, customers, and of course, investors. And those people might use it to try and differentiate between businesses who claim to have broader societal and environmental goals and those that actually are acting on those without doing the detailed due diligence themselves. So in this sense, it might enable some third parties to cut through what we know now as to be greenwashing, where people just make big claims but haven't necessarily put the practices and policies in place. It also puts you at the heart of a really strong community. And you can meet other B Corp founders and other businesses who have really similar principles. And we've certainly in our experience, people find that really useful, and that's a really supportive environment. Now, that indicates that the rewards are quite high, and that will lead us on to what you need to become a B Corp, which is quite a rigorous process. So, how do people become B Corps, or how do businesses become B Corps? Now, I'm a lawyer. We'll start with the legal aspect. So a crucial step towards becoming a B Corp is meeting what B Lab refer to as the legal requirement, which means that certified B Corps change their constitutions so that they are legally required to consider the impact of their decisions on all their stakeholders. Now, this is achieved by companies amending their governing documents to include specific wording to reflect the underlying principles which B Lab is seeking to achieve. For UK-based limited companies, this means amending the company's Articles of Association. So, arguably, this form of stakeholder governance already exists in the UK in a way that it doesn't with some other countries, as it already appears in the UK Companies Act, which applies to all UK companies anyway. The US don't have a direct equivalent of this sort of entrenched stakeholder governance, which is part of the reason B Corp was developed in the US. However, even though we've got the Companies Act and the directors' duties at Section 172, which some of you might be familiar with already, the B Corp legal requirement takes this even further in the UK, and they prescribe certain wording that you need to amend your articles to adopt. So this kind of broader focus that B Lab are driving covers the following matters. The company's object must include having a material positive impact on society and the environment, as well as promoting the success of the company for the benefit of the members as a whole. And in seeking to meet that objective, directors are required to have regard to the long-term impact of decisions. So the interests of employees as well, and the impact on the community and the environment, amongst other factors. And there's also an obligation to circulate an annual impact report, analysing the company's impact in light of its objects. So that's the legal requirement. What else does a business need to do to become a B Corp? So the legal requirement is just one element of a number of steps that businesses must take. And the primary aspect here is the B Impact Assessment, or the BIA. Now, this takes the form of a set of questions which are used to measure a business's positive impact on its workers, suppliers, community, and the environment. And all these questions together give a certain score. And I think it's 80, which is the score that's required for someone to achieve B Corp certification. So the BIA adapts depending on the organizational structure and the sector of the applicant. So it will be a bit different for everyone. But the B Lab website offers some examples of these questions to give you a flavour of what's asked. And I'm going to give you these examples now. So we've got under governance, what portion of your management is evaluated in writing on their performance with regard to corporate, social and environmental targets? Workers, what percentage of the company is owned by full-time workers, excluding founders and executives? Community, what percentage of management is from underrepresented populations? So this includes women, minority and previously excluded populations, people with disabilities, and people living in low-income communities. Environment, does your company monitor and record its universal waste production? And customers, how do you verify that your product improves the impact of your client organization? So the good thing about the BIA is that it's a free tool you can use if you want to understand more about what's asked. And you can also search for B Corps on the B Lab website, and some have really helpfully published their full impact assessments. So I had a look around the other day and I saw that Ella's Kitchen, the really popular baby food brand, for example, has published its complete impact assessment. So that can give anyone who's looking at B Corp certification a really, really good idea of what's involved and how people have answered those questions. So each company is scored on its answer to the questions, and an overall score of 80 qualifies for B Corp certification. It's not just a matter of answering the questions. Every answer needs to be able to be backed up with evidence, and B Lab will look to verify your scores with that evidence. So the BIA is prepared by the applicant company, and then this verification process happens. And it's really unusual for a business to achieve the relevant score on an initial assessment. So B Lab also offers various ways to help a business improve their score, such as goal setting and best practice guides. And various third parties can also help with this. And we'll discuss this in a bit more detail below. And the BIA also includes a disclosure questionnaire, which might mean you lose points on certain things. So if there are any sensitive practices, such as producing or trading tobacco, or you've had fines like tax penalties or sanctions affecting or relating to the company. So all of this information is drawn together to come up with your final score. And once the business has got a verified score of more than 80 points on the BIA, and that includes points for the legal requirement, which we talked about, it's eligible to sign the B Corp agreement, pay the annual fees, and officially call itself a B Corp. Now, one thing that I find quite interesting is that B Lab indicates that what it calls ordinary businesses, non-B Corp businesses, have a median score of 50.9. So if you want to have a look at the questions and sort of see where you'd sit at the moment, that's sort of the median. So how long does it take? On average, it takes a year to certify. And this tells you what a big challenge and commitment it can be. So usually this starts with the company completing the impact assessment themselves, then spending time working on the improvements to increase its score. And after the final submission, B-Lab appoints someone to review and verify your scores, as we've mentioned, and this can take months. You join the queue and then it's up to 6 months for that verification process to complete. Now, it doesn't stop there. Once a business is B Corp certified, it must recertify every 3 years to maintain its status. And actually, we recently had a GBA roundtable with a number of B Corp founders, which was excellent. And one of the things that came out of the discussion is that after the certification process, the challenges don't stop. It's obviously a very high reward certification, but companies have to continuously strive to meet the B Corp standards, and recertification can be nearly as challenging as that initial process. In terms of cost, there's a submission fee of £250 and also an annual certification fee, which is determined by the relevant company's revenue. You might also want to spend money on third-party advice and assistance. So it is worth thinking about a budget before you get started and working out whether you can afford to get that extra help externally. So how do businesses find this process? So as you've probably gathered, the impact assessment is a very detailed process, and it can take a lot of effort from the relevant company, and particularly the founders and the management team. And another thing that came up at the recent roundtable was just how involved it is. But people found that really, really beneficial, and founders tend to really enjoy getting into the detail of their business and in particular what it's doing to drive that social and environmental positive change. But there is quite a lot of paper and quite a lot to understand. So I think it is worth thinking about that before you embark on it. But I think that's one of the reasons that the B Corp status, when people do achieve it, is so valuable. So as I mentioned previously, you can also be a pending B Corp. So if you haven't been around for a year, younger companies who aspire to B Corp status in future can apply for this pending B Corp status. To do this, they need to meet the legal requirement in the same way as B Corp. So that's the amendment to the articles for UK companies, and also to complete a prospective impact assessment. The idea being that this will identify the right policies and practices to put in place as the company grows, with a view to completing a proper impact assessment and seeking to achieve the B Corp status in future. So, how can third parties help with this? Well, there are now various B Corp and social impact consultancies who will help you have an initial look at your business to see whether you're ready and help you identify ways in which you can improve your impact assessment score. And that is a really useful thing to do if you've got the budget to help with that. And there are also certain things that we as lawyers will be able to help with. So I'll talk in a bit more detail about those. The first is obviously the B-Lab's legal requirement. So we can help companies meet this by assisting companies with amending their articles of association. This requires a special resolution of the members of the relevant company, which is more than 75% of the company's shareholders voting in favour of the amendment. And the company may also require other approvals, depending on the terms of any shareholders agreement or founders agreement that you've already got in place. Quite often these are things like the unanimous agreement of founders or the approval of investors holding, over 30% of the shares. So we can review those agreements to see what's required. And then the board will need to hold a meeting to circulate the special resolution and any other consents. And the applicant company will need to ensure that the new articles are filed at Companies House and the resolution in the requisite timeframe. Now, the applicant company may also wish to amend any shareholders or founders agreement in place to demonstrate its commitment to the B Corp principles and align with the articles. And there are other things we can do to help you improve your BIA score. So we can assist with drafting or amending documents required to achieve certain scores. So things like your data and privacy policies or an employee handbook, or a policy designed to reduce the environmental footprint caused by corporate travel or commuting. And in doing so, we can help ensure that your company keeps up the necessary practices in order to maintain its B Corp status. We can also help you tidy up your commercial contracts, including your customer T's and C's, supplier contracts, etc., depending on where you find yourself after an initial assessment and what your main areas for improvement are to achieve that score that you need to certify. So some final thoughts on this. Now, I think from speaking to and working with people at certified B Corps, and from what you would have heard today, there's no doubt that there's a lot of hard work involved in getting that certification. But in many ways, I think that's why it's such a powerful tool. It does cut through any form of greenwashing. And I think consumers, employees, investors can see that those companies are attractive because of the quality of that certification. And it's easy from an outside perspective to know when you see that those companies really are so committed to positive and social environmental change. Now, having said that, I think that not every company is ready to apply for B Corp certification, or in many ways that doesn't matter. If a company is interested in that positive change, the impact assessment tool is free and open to everyone. So if submission or the thought of submission is a long way off for you, there's still the opportunity to do a really thorough internal audit of where your company sits and whether there's more you can be doing to be a force for good, if that's what you're interested in. And if you're just starting out, you can use that as a framework for growth. So that's it from me. Thank you very much. And please do let us know if you've got any questions or you'd like to get in touch for any advice regarding B Corps or anything else to do with your startups and scale ups. Thank you very much.
Great, Sally. I think there are a couple of questions that people would be keen to hear your answers from today. So if you'd like to take a look at the bottom of the screen there, in the Q&A box, we've got a couple of questions coming through. And if anybody else has any more questions today, please submit these before the end of the session. Sally, are you able to see those?
Yeah, I can see those. Okay, so the first one is, can KICS apply for B Corp status as they're not charitable? They're community interest companies and therefore registered with Companies House. So that's an interesting question that I actually don't know the answer to. So I'll have to have a look at that for you. But I think, as you say, they are, I do wonder, and I have had some chats with companies who have been considering KIC status or B Corp status, and they've gone down the KIC route. So it might be that is just because it provides an alternative, but I don't know if that precludes B Corp status for KICs. I'd have to have another look into that. Sorry to not be more helpful on that question. So if you have a good ESG stance already, what would be the advantages of B Corp? So I think we've touched on this a bit, but I think it's that sort of external stamp of approval. There might be instances where third parties, whether that's your customers, suppliers, investors, or talent, are considering, their next step on whether someone has a good ESG stance. And it might be that if they've got the time to do the due diligence and look into you and see that you can back up your kind of ESG outlook, then they don't mind that there isn't a B Corp certification there. But for some people, I think it cuts through that. Maybe they're time poor and they see the B Corp certification, and that just gives them the sort of confidence that the company's got a good ESG stance already without doing that extra investigation. But I don't think it's not the be all and end all. Obviously, it's great, but it is a lot of work and there are alternatives. So I think if you do have a good ESG stance already, that's obviously the most important thing. Parla, we're a pre-revenue R&D company that will not create revenue until 2026. Very keen on the principles of B Corp, but would we need to have profit turnover before we could look at being certified? I'm not sure if you need profit turnover, but you might want to just hold off until you're more established. I would say that the work involved in certification might be something that you don't want to commit to until you've started turning a profit. However, as I mentioned, that tool is free and available. So it might be something that you look at and then use for a framework for growth and consider certifying later in the day. Okay, the next question. So I'm Sylvia. I have a startup film and design production company, just completed a documentary raising awareness about climate change, B's holistic approach. Does this in any way increase a score for a B Corp? I'm a tiny production company. I don't think necessarily of itself that's going to improve your score, because as I mentioned, it's more to do with the practices of your business. So they'll be looking at things like your ownership structure, your governance structure, and your internal policies. I think obviously it sounds positive that the product you're working on is also sort of seeking positive environmental change, but I think B Corp, the focus is a bit more internal than that. So it's also the way in which your business is run. So you need to have a think about that as well. But I think, again, it's probably worth looking into the impact assessment tool and seeing where you think you would currently sit on those questions. So timescales, is it likely to be at least a year from first submission of the impact assessment? Not necessarily. So I think the year is from when you in that year is going to take you the time initially to put the answers to your assessment together, and then it's difficult to say. So if the verification process, I think that element is the process which can take around 6 months. So you do your first impact assessment, and then there's some verification. Then you get your score. You might have to make improvements. You might have already hit the 80, but that is quite unusual. And then there is also queuing time. So once you submit your impact assessment, it doesn't immediately get picked up for verification. There will be a slight waiting time. I don't know how long that is at the moment. So it's that verification which might take up to 6 months. So I think the year is a very rough estimation of what people tend to experience. And that's probably just a bit of an indication that it is a process. It's not something that you can expect to turn around within a couple of months. So I think all of those have been answered. So we might be finishing up a bit faster than expected, but happy to answer any other questions if people do have them.
Yeah, I have shared your sort of LinkedIn, and I'll share details later today. So to anybody watching the session, a link will be sent so you can watch this on demand, and contact details should you wish to speak to Sally or any of the team at Russell-Cooke. So thank you, Sally, for sharing your expertise and knowledge today. And thank you, everybody, for joining.
Thank you very much. Thank you.